I dial my son and ask the simplest question a mother can ask. So, when's the wedding? My daughter-in-law meets my eyes with a soft, practiced smile that feels like a razor. Oh, we got married last week. We only invited special people. The word special detonates in the room, echoing off the furniture I bought, settling like ash on the pale pink dress still hanging in my closet with its tags on the new shoes waiting by the door, on the envelope where a neat $1,000 wedding gift sleeps like a secret I'll never give. I've paid their rent for 3 years, $500 a month, on time, every time kept their refrigerator humming with groceries, covered little emergencies with big checks, and smiled through the strain so my only child could build a life without fear. And here I stand, phone in hand, heavy as a brick, watching my son look anywhere but at me while Lena swings an ankle over the armrest of the sofa I financed and calls herself a bride. The house is spotless. I scrubbed it last night, foolish and hopeful, imagining laughter after the ceremony, flowers on my table, my face somewhere in the photos they'll frame. Instead, I've already seen the pictures online, her parents beaming, her siblings toasting, her white dress sparkling like a promise someone else paid for. I swallow and it is ice. I am a generous woman, not a special one. I am a steady account number, not a guest. Something cold moves through me, a needle of clarity threading a seam I've been too tender to stitch. I don't raise my voice. I don't cry. I just breathe and realize the most dangerous truth. Love without respect is a bill that never stops coming due. That night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by the ghosts of every dollar I had ever given them. The silence in the house was deafening. No phone calls, no laughter, no messages asking for another small favor. I opened my checkbook, my old ledger, the receipts I had kept in a neat folder labeled for Max. It felt like I was dissecting my own heart with a pen. $500 every month for rent, 36 months, $18,000. Groceries and little luxuries, about $200 each month, $7,000 more. Gifts for birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, $3,000 at least. Emergency money for Lena's hospital visits, for the air conditioner that broke, for the car they never paid off. When I was done, the number glared up at me like a confession. $33,400. That was the price of my blindness. I remembered the years I'd worked double shifts at the library after my husband died, saving every cent for a quiet retirement. He had left me a small pension and a message in his will. Live peacefully, Renate. You've earned it. But peace had turned into obligation, and obligation had turned into servitude. I had believed that generosity could glue a family together. I had been wrong. When dawn began to tint the curtains, I brewed myself a pot of coffee and stared into the mirror over the sink. The woman who looked back wasn't fragile. She was simply tired of being needed but never wanted. Her eyes, lined with years of sacrifice, no longer pleaded for affection. They demanded respect. By mid-morning, I was at the bank. Mr. Klein, the branch manager, greeted me with his usual warmth. Mrs. Richter, another transfer for Max? Not this time, I said quietly. Today I'm canceling all of them. He blinked, surprised. For 3 years, those transfers had been as punctual as sunrise. Are you sure? Did something happen? Yes, I replied. I woke up. He hesitated, then nodded, understanding more than I said aloud. We can stop the automatic payments immediately. Would you also like to secure your accounts? Yes, change every access code, every linked name. No one touches my money again. While he typed, my phone buzzed relentlessly in my purse. Lena, then Max, then Lena again. I let it ring. Mr. Klein handed me the new papers to sign. You've always been one of our kindest clients, he said softly. I hope you're not being pressured. I smiled for the first time in days. No, Mr. Klein. I've just stopped pressuring myself. When I walked out of the bank, the sun felt different, less like something to hurry under, more like something to stand in. My steps were lighter. For the first time, my money was truly mine. Not earmarked for someone else's rent or dinner or failed dream. Mine. At home, I sat at the table again, the same one where I had planned surprise gifts and written checks with shaking hands. I spread out my bank statements and studied them like a map. Each transaction was a breadcrumb leading back to a woman I no longer wanted to be. I thought about all the trips I had canceled to save for Max. The friends I'd stopped visiting because I was always available for their emergencies. The hobbies I'd abandoned because every dollar I spent on myself was one less for them. What had I gained in return? Silence. Indifference. Exclusion. The phone rang again. This time, I didn't even look at the screen. I poured myself another cup of coffee and let it ring out. By the third attempt, they switched to text messages. Mom, please answer. We need to talk. Delete. Renate, the rent is due. You forgot to send the money. Delete. I walked to the window and looked out at the small garden my husband had planted years ago. The roses were blooming wildly, unapologetically, without permission. I envied them. In the afternoon, I went for a walk, my first in months that wasn't an errand. Not to the bank, not to the supermarket, not to pay their bills. Just a walk for me. The air was crisp, the sky a washed-out blue. I passed the park where Max used to play as a child. I could still see him running toward me, his little hands sticky with ice cream, shouting, "Mom, watch me." When did that boy disappear? When did love turn into invoices and guilt? I stopped in front of the same bank door I had walked through that morning. Mr. Klein saw me from inside and waved. For a second, I almost went back in, not to undo anything, but to thank him for witnessing my first act of freedom. Instead, I smiled and kept walking. At home, the answering machine was full. I erased every message without listening. Then I opened my notebook and wrote a single sentence across the top of a clean page. From today, I live for myself. The words looked fragile, but they held a kind of quiet power. That night I didn't cry, not out of sadness, not even out of anger. What I felt was stranger, colder, like I had stepped out of someone else's shadow and finally felt my own shape. I made myself a simple dinner, washed the dishes, and sat by the window watching the streetlights flicker on. For years I had believed that love required proof in the form of sacrifice, that a good mother gave without question, even when giving meant erasing herself. But the truth settled into me with the calm weight of inevitability. A love that demands your silence is not love. It's dependence disguised as devotion. As I prepared for bed, I glanced once more at the pale pink dress still hanging in the closet. I didn't feel humiliation anymore. Only clarity. I took it down, folded it carefully, and placed it in a donation bag. Someone else could wear it to a celebration that actually included love. Before turning off the lights, I whispered to the empty room, "No more." And the silence that answered me wasn't loneliness, it was peace. A week passed before the real storm hit. I had begun to enjoy the quiet, no buzzing phone, no unexpected knocks, no one asking for just a little help. The coffee tasted better when I didn't drink it while checking my balance. My mornings had rhythm again. But peace never lasts long when others depend on your guilt to survive. That afternoon, I returned from the grocery store to find 3 cars parked in front of my house, Max's old sedan, Lena's white hatchback, and a sleek gray Mercedes I didn't recognize. My stomach tightened. Through the front window, I could see movement inside. They were already in my living room. My keys slipped slightly in my hand as I approached the door. When I stepped inside, the scene froze for a second. Max sat hunched on my sofa, his head in his hands. Lena paced the floor like a caged animal. And at my dining table, a man in a tailored suit was calmly flipping through a folder filled with my personal documents, bank statements, insurance papers, even my will. "What is happening here?" My voice was steady but louder than I intended. Lena turned first, her smile stretched too tight. "Oh, Renate, thank God you're home. We need to talk. This is Mr. Fisher from the Family Law Office. He's here to help with your situation." "My situation?" I repeated slowly, each syllable landing like a warning. I wasn't aware that I had one. Max looked up, eyes bloodshot, his voice rehearsed. "Mom, please don't be angry. We're worried about you. You've been acting strange. First, you canceled the transfers without explaining anything. Then you stopped answering our calls. We just want to help." Mr. Fisher rose and offered his hand. "Mrs. Richter, I'm a family attorney. Your children are concerned about your well-being. They asked me to review your finances and make sure everything is in order." I didn't take his hand. Instead, I crossed the room and gathered every sheet of paper he'd been touching. "These are my private records," I said, my voice like glass. "You have no right to look at them without my consent." Lena moved closer, feigning tenderness. "Renate, honey, we know this must feel invasive, but you've been under so much stress lately. Maybe you don't realize it, but at your age, confusion can come suddenly. We just want to make sure you're okay." "Confusion?" The word felt poisonous in my mouth. Is that what you call finally setting boundaries? Max's tone hardened. Mom, don't make this harder than it needs to be. We're trying to protect you. You've been isolated, paranoid, doing things that don't make sense. Like what? I snapped. Changing my locks? Protecting my money from people who treat me like a bank? That seems perfectly rational to me. Mr. Fisher interjected with professional calm. Mrs. Richter, no one is accusing you of anything. We're simply proposing a temporary power of attorney just until you feel better. Your son would manage your accounts, pay your bills. I pay my own bills. He continued as if I hadn't spoken. And ensure you're not taken advantage of. I took the folder he extended toward me, unopened, and threw it straight into the trash can beside the table. The only thing being taken advantage of here is my patience. You can all leave now. Lena's composure cracked. Her voice rose shrill. You can't just cut us off, Renate. We've built our lives around your support. The rent, the car, the credit card, you co-signed. My name is not a guarantee for your irresponsibility, I interrupted. Max stood, his face red with frustration. Mom, be reasonable. Reasonable? I echoed, trembling not with fear but fury. For years, I was reasonable. I paid rent that wasn't mine. I fed mouths that never said thank you. I financed a life that didn't include me. That's over. Lena crossed her arms. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We're just speeding up the process. There it was. The truth. Naked and unapologetic. In their eyes, I was already dead in inheritance with a pulse. Out, I said quietly. All of you, get out of my house. Mr. Fisher tried one last time. Mrs. Richter, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but if your family believes your decision-making capacity is impaired, they have legal options. A court can... I cut him off. Then you'd better prepare your best case, Mr. Fisher. But before you try to declare me incompetent, do your research. I've managed my finances flawlessly for 40 years. I raised a child alone after my husband's death. I've never missed a payment, never defaulted, never needed saving. I don't need help now. The lawyer's expression tightened. Max grabbed Lena's hand. This isn't over, he muttered. Good, I said. Then we agree on something. They stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled. I stood there in the silence they left behind, feeling the weight of every breath. My hands shook not from fear but from adrenaline. I walked to the window and watched their cars pull away. For years I'd cried when they left, terrified of losing their affection. Now, I felt only relief. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every moment, the lawyer's smug tone, Lena's false concern, Max's wounded pride. Each memory hardened something inside me. I realized it wasn't just betrayal I was facing. It was an attempt to erase me while I was still alive. At 6 a.m., I was already dressed. The first thing I did was call Mr. Weber, the lawyer who had handled my husband's will years ago. A man of integrity, not performance. When I explained what had happened, he was silent for a moment, then said, Mrs. Richter, what they did isn't just disrespectful, it's illegal. Entering your home, accessing private documents without consent, those are serious violations. I'm not looking for revenge, I said quietly. I just want protection. And you'll have it, he replied. But we'll do this the right way. No emotion, just evidence. I'll meet you in an hour. As I hung up, I realized how calm I felt. The fear was gone. In its place was something sharper resolve. I looked around my living room, the furniture I'd bought for them, the table where they'd plotted to take what little peace I had left. Then I said aloud, to no one in particular, this house belongs to me. This life belongs to me. And for the first time in years, it sounded true. The morning air was crisp when I stepped outside, a thin mist clinging to the garden fence like memory. I stood there for a moment, letting the quiet settle into me. No shouting, no accusations, no ringing phones. Just the slow rhythm of breathing mine, steady for once. But I knew peace wasn't something you received, it was something you defended. By 9 o'clock, Mr. Weber was sitting across from me in my kitchen, a briefcase open like a vault of calm authority. He listened without interrupting as I told him every detail: Lena's fake concern, the lawyer's smug intrusion, Max's warning that this isn't over. When I finished, he folded his hands. "What your son and daughter-in-law attempted yesterday," he said evenly, "is known as elder financial abuse. It's more common than people think, and it's against the law." The words hung in the air. Abuse. Such a heavy word, one I had always reserved for physical harm. But this slow erosion of trust, the manipulation, the invasion of my home was no less violent. "What can I do?" I asked. "We'll start by documenting everything," he said. "Every transfer, every expense, every time they pressured you for money. Then we'll secure your property, change the locks, install surveillance. You need to make it clear that you're not an easy target anymore." I nodded. It wasn't fear that filled me now, it was focus. For years, I had been meticulous with my accounts, every cent tracked. I had never imagined that habit would one day become my shield. When he left, I went straight to the hardware store down the street. The owner, Mr. Summer, looked up from the counter and smiled. "Mrs. Richter, another repair for your son?" "Not this time," I said with a small smile of my own. "Today, I'm fixing something for me." He raised his eyebrows but didn't ask. I chose the strongest locks they had, the kind that came with lifetime guarantees. "I'll have my son Ethan install them this afternoon," he said. "He also does security systems if you're interested." "I am," I replied. "Very interested." When Ethan arrived a few hours later, he was all youthful energy and quiet respect. "You're making the right move," he said while examining my old locks. "It's not paranoia to protect what's yours." While he worked, the scent of metal and fresh paint filled the house. It felt symbolic, like sealing a wound. I watched him screw in the final plate and test the new key. The click was satisfying. Final. "Do you want cameras too?" he asked. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Every entrance. Inside and out." He nodded, scribbling notes. "It'll give you peace of mind. Everything connects to your phone. You'll always know who's at your door." When he left, promising to return the next morning to finish the installation, I sat on the sofa and looked around. The same sofa where Lena had lounged so casually. The same room where a stranger had flipped through my papers. Now it felt different, mine again. The phone rang then. An unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Renate. It's Lena." Her voice was syrupy, trembling at the edges. "Please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults." "Speak," I said flatly. "I know you're upset about the wedding," she began. "It was a misunderstanding. We didn't mean to hurt you. How about we have dinner together? Just us. To celebrate properly this time. I'll cook your favorite stew." Her manipulation was so transparent it was almost comical. "Lena," I said slowly, "how much rent do you owe right now?" The silence on the line was answer enough. 2 months, she muttered finally. "But that's not why I'm calling." "Of course it is," I replied, "because when you want something, you remember my number." "Renate, please," she said, her voice breaking into tears that sounded rehearsed. "We miss you. Max misses you. We can't do this without you." "You've been doing it without me since your wedding day," I said coldly. "You made that very clear." I ended the call before she could respond. For a moment I stood there, phone still in my hand, feeling the echo of her voice fade from the walls. Once, that kind of plea would have broken me. Now, it only confirmed what I already knew. They missed my money, not me. I needed air. So I walked. Down the same streets where I used to rush to mail checks, to buy groceries they wanted, to deposit transfers they demanded. Now each step felt like reclaiming a little ground I had surrendered. As I passed the old salon on the corner, Cynthia, my longtime hairdresser, spotted me through the window and waved. "Mrs. Richter, long time no see." On impulse, I went in. The scent of shampoo and chatter was comforting. "Well, look at you," Cynthia said, wrapping a cape around my shoulders. "What are we doing today?" "Everything," I said. "Cut, color, nails, the works." She laughed. "You've come to the right place." As the scissors snipped away the dull ends of my hair, I felt something else being cut loose, the weight of years spent caring for people who never looked back. "Any special occasion?" she asked. "Yes," I said after a pause. "Freedom." By the time she finished, I hardly recognized myself in the mirror. The gray strands were gone, replaced by a soft, confident shade of silver blonde. My nails were neat, my face lighter somehow. Cynthia smiled. "You look beautiful, but more than that, you look free." Maybe I finally am. Walking home, I caught my reflection in a shop window and stopped. There she was, the woman who had once felt invisible, now standing tall, eyes clear, stride firm. I smiled at her. When I reached my porch, Eleanor Brooks, the neighbor I had seen only in passing for years, was waiting with a mug in her hands. "Mrs. Richter?" she said shyly. "I hope I'm not intruding. I heard, raised voices the other day. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." Her concern was genuine. It startled me that someone who barely knew me could sound more sincere than my own family. "I'm fine," I said softly. Then after a pause, "Would you like some coffee? I could use the company." Inside, as we sat at the same table where so much had unraveled, I told her everything. She listened without judgment, eyes kind but sharp. "You did the right thing," she said when I finished. "I went through something similar with my daughter years ago. It takes courage to stop feeding the hand that bites you." Her words stayed with me long after she left. That night, I stood in my kitchen, staring out at the garden under the soft glow of the new porch light. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for a call, for approval, for someone else's needs. The world was quiet. The locks were new. The cameras would be installed tomorrow. And me? I was finally, undeniably, safe. The next morning began with the steady hum of drills and the smell of sawdust. Ethan arrived early, polite as ever, to finish the security installation. The rhythmic sound of his tools echoed through the house like a heartbeat, proof that this time protection was being built for me. Every click, every tightened screw felt like a small reclaiming of power. By noon, the cameras were online. "There," Ethan said, handing me the tablet linked to the system. "You can see every corner of your house from here. If anyone steps onto your porch, you'll know instantly." I thanked him, watching as he packed up his tools. When he drove away, the silence returned, but this time, it wasn't hollow. It was full. The kind of silence that comes when a storm passes, but the air still trembles with what it left behind. I made myself lunch, simple toast and tomato soup. The phone rang once, twice. Unknown number. I ignored it. But when it rang again with the same persistence, a tiny alarm flickered in my chest. Maybe Ethan had forgotten something. "Hello?" I answered. "Mrs. Richter?" A woman's voice, crisp, official, practiced. "This is Mrs. Schmidt from the Department of Senior Services. We've received a report that you may be in a vulnerable situation and need a wellness check." The soup spoon froze in my hand. "A report?" "Yes, ma'am. Your family expressed concern about your recent behavior, erratic spending changes, installing unnecessary surveillance, cutting off contact. I just need a few minutes of your time." So that was their next move. "Can I see your identification, Mrs. Schmidt?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. She arrived 10 minutes later, badge glinting under the porch light. Early 40s, tidy hair, government calm. She smiled with the kind of sympathy that always precedes suspicion. "May I come in?" I hesitated, then nodded. Refusing her would only fuel the narrative they were constructing. She stepped inside, scanning the room as if cataloging evidence. "Lovely home," she said lightly. "You've lived here long?" 40 years, I replied. "Since my husband and I bought it. I raised my son here." She opened her folder. "According to our report, you recently cut off all financial support to your son and daughter-in-law, stopped communicating with them, and installed surveillance equipment. Is that correct?" "Correct," I said. "May I ask why?" "Because they were using me," I said simply. Her pen paused midair. "Using you?" "For 3 years I paid their rent, their groceries, their bills over $33,000, and when I stopped, they accused me of losing my mind." "Oh." She looked up, surprise flickering behind her professional mask. "Do you have documentation of those payments?" I gestured to the folder on the counter. Every receipt, every bank transfer, every message. She flipped through them silently, her pen no longer moving. "Mrs. Richter," she said at last, "your family described your decision as impulsive and out of character. They said you've been isolating yourself, refusing medical help. I smiled thinly. I haven't isolated. I've simply stopped subsidizing manipulation, and as for medical help, I'm perfectly healthy. Would you like to see my last physical exam? It's in there too. Her composure faltered. That won't be necessary. But may I ask why all the security measures? Because they broke into my house with a lawyer and went through my personal papers without permission. I'd call that a good reason to change locks, wouldn't you? She blinked, uncertain. I understand you have a job to do, I continued, softer now, but you're looking at the wrong person. I'm not the one who needs protection from myself. I'm the one who finally learned how to protect myself from others. The words landed heavy between us. Before she could respond, the doorbell rang. My heart stuttered, but the camera feed on my tablet showed exactly who it was, Mr. Weber. I exhaled in relief. My attorney, I said, heading to the door. He entered with his usual calm and greeted Mrs. Schmidt politely. Good afternoon. My client called me as soon as she mentioned this visit. May I see your authorization for entry? She hesitated, but handed over a printed notice. Weber scanned it, his jaw tightening slightly. I see. A family-initiated wellness check. These are unfortunately common in cases of elder financial coercion. You should know that my client is under legal representation, and all her affairs are fully documented. Mrs. Schmidt straightened. We're simply following protocol. The report describes significant behavioral changes. The behavioral change, Weber interrupted gently, was that she stopped being exploited. Silence. Then Mrs. Schmidt sighed, closing her folder. I understand. May I ask a few final questions? Go ahead, Weber said. Mrs. Richter, do you handle your own finances? Yes. Do you live independently? Yes. Any medical conditions or medications that affect cognition? None. Just vitamins. You can verify with my doctor if you'd like. Mrs. Schmidt nodded slowly. And your home is secure, clean, and in good order. I see no immediate risk. She gathered her papers. Mrs. Richter, I believe you're perfectly capable. I'll be closing this report. When she left, Weber exhaled. They're escalating. Next time it could be a court summons. We need to be ready. I nodded. The exhaustion hit me then, not physical, but the kind that seeps into your bones when you realize how far people will go for greed. As evening fell, I brewed a pot of tea and sat by the window. The neighborhood was calm. Children rode bicycles down the street, laughter echoing in the distance. I envied that simplicity. The world before trust required paperwork. Weber's words replayed in my mind. They're escalating. Was this how family died, not with shouting, but with signatures and forged concern? I thought about Max as a boy again, running through this very hallway with scraped knees, yelling, "Mom, look!" His laughter had been the pulse of this house. Somewhere along the way, that sound had turned into the clicking of debit cards and the rustle of unpaid bills. My phone buzzed again, another unknown number. I didn't answer. I'd learned that not every voice that says your name deserves to be heard. Outside, the motion light flicked on. For a heartbeat, my chest tightened. Old habits, old fears. But the camera screen showed only a cat crossing the porch. I smiled. A small, quiet smile. The house, the garden, the life, they were mine again. And this time, I intended to keep them safe. The next few days passed in deceptive calm, like the sea before another storm. I kept myself busy gardening, cleaning the attic, sorting through old photographs. Every chore felt like a reclamation of space, of purpose. Still, I knew better than to believe silence meant safety. When people lose control of their source of power, they get desperate. That Friday morning, the desperation arrived. I was trimming the rose bushes when I saw a familiar car slow down across the street. Max's. He didn't get out, just sat there, engine idling, pretending to check his phone. He drove away after a few minutes, only to pass by again later that afternoon, this time with Lena in the passenger seat. She turned her head toward my house but didn't wave. By evening, I had counted 4 slow passes. Each time, the same routine, no eye contact, no confrontation, just surveillance. It was almost amusing. They were studying me now, the same way they used to monitor my bank balance. I called Mr. Weber and told him. Keep a record, he said. Dates, times, license plates. We'll build a timeline. Every visit strengthens our case. I did as instructed. A small notebook by the door became my log of their obsession. Friday 2:15 p.m., Max alone. 4:42 p.m., Max and Lena, same car. Saturday 10:03 a.m. drove by again. The act of writing gave me back control. But on Sunday, it escalated. The doorbell rang at 9:30 a.m. I glanced at the camera feed and froze. A young woman in a dark blazer stood at the door, holding a clipboard and a manila folder. I didn't recognize her, but the professional smile told me everything I needed to know. "Good morning, Mrs. Richter," she said when I opened the door a few inches. "My name is Clara Weiss. I'm a private investigator working with the firm representing your son and daughter-in-law. May I have a moment of your time?" "Absolutely not," I said, and began to close the door. Her hand stopped it, polite but firm. "Ma'am, this is simply a courtesy visit. They're very worried about you." A bling. "Then tell them to worry about their own bills." I snapped and slammed the door. I stood there for a few seconds, heart racing, then turned toward my tablet screen. The camera had caught everything: her face, her badge, her attempt to wedge the door open. I smiled grimly. Another entry for my log. That afternoon, I took the footage straight to Mr. Weber. His brow furrowed as he watched the video. "They're testing boundaries," he said. "Trying to provoke a reaction they can use against you: anger, confusion, instability. Don't give it to them." "Let them knock," I said. "The only thing they'll get is a recording." He smiled approvingly. "You're learning fast." Over the next week, their tactics shifted. They began planting rumors. Mrs. Klein, a neighbor 2 houses down, stopped me at the mailbox one morning and said hesitantly, "Renate, dear, I heard you've been having some troubles. Are you okay?" "Max said you've been forgetting things." My jaw clenched, but I forced a smile. "I remember everything, Mrs. Klein, especially who I can trust." That night, I couldn't sleep. Their campaign of whispers was worse than direct confrontation. It was poison, slow, and invisible. I sat by the window watching the empty street, moonlight glinting off the new locks, and wondered how long they would keep clawing at the walls of my peace. The next morning, a knock came again, but this time it was gentle, hesitant. Through the camera feed, I saw Eleanor standing there clutching a thermos. "Coffee?" she asked when I opened the door. "Strong enough to burn through bad moods." I laughed. "Come in." We sat in the kitchen, steam rising between us. I told her about the car surveillance, the investigator, the rumors. She listened quietly, her eyes steady. "You know," she said after a moment, "when my daughter tried the same thing, I almost broke. You start doubting yourself. That's what they want to make you question your own sanity so you'll surrender." "How did you stop it?" "I didn't," she said softly. "The truth did. Eventually their lies ran out of oxygen. Keep everything documented and let time expose them." Her words settled over me like a blanket, warm, heavy grounding. After she left, I went to the pharmacy to refill a bottle of vitamins. When I stepped up to the counter, Mr. Green, the pharmacist I'd known for years, avoided my eyes. His hands trembled slightly as he scanned the barcode. "Everything all right, Mr. Green?" I asked. He hesitated. "Mrs. Richter, I owe you an apology." "For what?" "Your daughter-in-law came here 2 weeks ago," he said quietly. "She asked about your medication history. I told her you only buy supplements, no prescriptions. She said it was proof you weren't taking care of your health. Then she asked me to sign a form, said it was for insurance verification." He looked down, ashamed. I think it was part of their legal file. For a moment, all I could do was stare. The audacity was breathtaking. They had forged concern into evidence. "Mr. Green," I said, my voice low, "I need you to write a statement explaining exactly what happened, what you were told, what you signed, and that I have no medical issues requiring medication." "Of course," he said quickly. "I'll type it up today. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Richter." When I left the pharmacy, the autumn air hit me like ice. I walked slower than usual, each step heavy with realization. Their cruelty wasn't clumsy, it was calculated. That evening, I called Mr. Weber again and told him everything. "This is exactly the kind of evidence we need," he said. "We'll attach Mr. Green's statement to the file. It proves manipulation." "And what about my neighbor, Mr. Davis?" I asked. "He's been glaring at me like I'm radioactive. I have a feeling he's involved too." Weber sighed. They might be using him as a witness, someone to claim you've been behaving strangely. We'll visit him tomorrow." And so we did. "Mister." Davis opened the door wearing a look that could curdle milk. "Oh, it's you," he said flatly. "What do you want?" "Just a moment of your time," Weber said smoothly. "We understand you've made some statements about my client's behavior. We'd like to clarify a few details." "I said what I saw," Davis grumbled. "She's been acting weird, installing cameras, yelling at her family in the street, having strangers over at all hours. The cameras were installed after a break-in by those same family members," Weber said evenly. "And the strangers you mention are my colleagues and licensed contractors." Davis snorted. "That's what crazy people always say." I stepped forward then, meeting his eyes. "Mr. Davis, do you know what it feels like to have your own child try to take everything you've built? To have your neighbors believe you're insane because it's easier than understanding the truth?" For a flicker of a moment, his expression softened, but only for a heartbeat. "Not my business," he said, and shut the door. Outside, Weber placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Don't worry, his testimony won't hold. He's biased and uninformed." But I wasn't worried. I was something else entirely awake. That night, I added another entry to my logbook. Monday, 6:40 p.m., confronted Mr. Davis. Hostile but uninformed. Mr. Green cooperating. Truth accumulating. As I wrote, I realized something profound. The more they tried to paint me as unstable, the more stable I became. Every accusation forced me to become sharper, steadier, impossible to shake. When I turned off the lamp and walked down the hall, the house felt alive again, not with fear, but with quiet defiance. Let them watch. Let them whisper. I had truth on my side and a camera to prove it. The next morning, the sky was the color of steel still, heavy, waiting. I woke before sunrise, my body tense, as if my instincts already knew that something new was coming. The kettle whistled softly while I sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea and staring at the stack of folders that had become my armor. Bank statements, receipts, witness notes, even the signed declaration from Mr. Green. Proof of my sanity, my order, my truth. At 9 a.m., Mr. Weber arrived, punctual as always, his coat damp from the fog outside. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I've been ready for months," I replied. He nodded, a faint smile in his eyes. "Then today we add the final stone to your wall of evidence. You're going to take a cognitive evaluation. We need a professional record that no one can twist." The words landed with a strange weight. A test. It felt absurd after 71 years of independence. Someone wanted to measure my ability to think. But I understood. This wasn't about my mind. It was about their weaponizing doubt. We drove to Dr. Moore's office, a quiet building with pale walls and a view of a park. She was a woman in her 50s, with calm eyes and a voice that held both warmth and authority. She greeted me with a handshake that wasn't patronizing, but equal. "Mrs. Richter," she said, "I'm going to ask you a series of questions, some about your memory, others about your reasoning. There's no need to rush, just answer as you normally would." For 2 hours, she guided me through exercises that tested everything from logic to calculation. Dates, patterns, word recall, hypothetical scenarios about bills and decision-making. She even asked me to explain how I manage my finances, how I pay utilities, how I monitor investments. I spoke clearly, every answer anchored in the precision of a woman who had spent decades balancing her own books. When it was over, she looked up from her clipboard. "Mrs. Richter, you've performed exceptionally well. Your reasoning and comprehension are above average for your age. You're mentally sharp and fully capable of making your own financial decisions." Her words felt like a sunrise breaking through weeks of overcast sky. "Then," I asked quietly, "why do children do this to their parents?" Dr. Moore sighed, folding her hands. "Because money confuses love. When dependency replaces respect, greed disguises itself as care. You are far from the only one. What's happening to you has a name: elder financial exploitation. It's an epidemic that rarely gets prosecuted because it hides inside families." I felt something twist in my chest. "So it's not madness, it's theft." "Exactly," she said softly. "And you're doing what most victims never dare to do: fight back." When we left her office, Mr. Weber looked almost proud. "Her report will crush their argument. It's airtight." But relief didn't come immediately. Even with proof, the ache remained. Because every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every legal victory was a reminder of what I had lost, the illusion that my son's love was unconditional. That night, I sat by the window again, watching the reflection of the security lights ripple across the glass. My notebook lay open on the table. I wrote down Dr. Moore's words. When dependency replaces respect, greed disguises itself as care. I read it again and again until it became both wound and medicine. The following day, Eleanor invited me over for tea. When I entered her cozy living room, 3 other women sat around the table. Cynthia, the hairdresser, Maria, a retired nurse, and Alfreda, an elegant 80-year-old with silver jewelry that glimmered like quiet defiance. Eleanor gestured toward me. "Everyone, this is Renate. She's going through what we all once did." The women nodded with knowing smiles. Alfreda poured me tea. "Don't worry, dear. You're among survivors." Their stories spilled like confessions that had waited too long. Maria's brother had drained her savings for business investments. Cynthia's son had taken her house temporarily and never returned the deed. Alfreda's grandchildren had tried to have her declared incompetent to seize her late husband's pension. We shared the same scars, only etched in different handwriting. "You know what the cruelest part is?" Maria said. "It's not losing the money. It's realizing you never had the love you thought you did." I nodded slowly. "Exactly." Alfreda smiled faintly. "Then you're already healing. When the illusion breaks, clarity hurts, but it also frees." We talked for hours, laughing sometimes, crying other times. Each woman spoke with the calm of someone who had already walked through fire and found a way out. By the time I left, I carried not just tea warmth in my hands, but something I hadn't felt in months: belonging. When I got home, the house no longer felt empty. It felt mine in a deeper sense, a place of renewal, not retreat. I placed Dr. Moore's signed report on the kitchen counter and whispered, "For the record." The phone rang again that evening, unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom!" Max's voice cracked through the line. "We need to talk. Please." I said nothing. "Lena and I made mistakes," he continued. We didn't mean to hurt you." I could almost hear Lena whispering in the background, prompting his words. "Mom, we can fix this," he said, desperation leaking through the practiced tone. "If you just—" "Max," I interrupted softly. "Do you remember what you said to me that day? You told me everything I have would belong to you one day anyway." Silence. "I realized you were right," I continued. "Everything I have will belong to someone but not to you. It'll belong to me, as long as I'm alive. And when I'm gone, it'll belong to causes that actually know the meaning of gratitude." His voice trembled. "Mom, please don't." I ended the call. The phone buzzed again seconds later. I turned it face down and walked away. Later that night, I opened the curtains and looked out at the moon. My reflection stared back steady, older but unbroken. For years, I had been terrified of solitude. Now, solitude felt like sanctuary. I thought of Dr. Moore's calm voice, of Eleanor's laughter, of Alfreda's wisdom. I thought of the garden blooming again outside, of my husband's grave waiting for a visit I had postponed for too long. I picked up my pen and wrote one final sentence in my notebook. "They can question my sanity, but they can't rewrite my truth." I closed the book, turned off the lights, and went to bed. For the first time in months, I slept deeply, not from exhaustion, but from peace. 3 weeks later, the storm I had been preparing for finally arrived. It wasn't a surprise, not really just the next act in a performance I already knew by heart. Mr. Weber called early that morning, his voice unusually grave. "Renate," he said, "they've filed the lawsuit." I didn't even have to ask which one. "For mental incompetence?" "Yes," he replied. "They're requesting guardianship, claiming you're no longer fit to manage your own finances. The hearing is in 2 weeks. For a long moment, I said nothing. I just looked out the window at the gray morning light spilling over the garden. The air was cool, calm, deceitfully peaceful. "I expected this," I said finally. "I know," he said softly, "but it still hurts." And it did. Not because I feared losing my money, I had already learned to fight for that, but because every motion they filed, every accusation they signed their names to, was another way of saying, we don't see you as a mother anymore. That afternoon, Mr. Weber came over with a folder full of documents. He spread them on the table I used to set for family dinners. Now it looked like a courtroom. They're claiming you've shown erratic behavior, he explained, flipping through the pages. That you've refused medical treatment, that you hoard medication, that you isolate yourself from your family. They even have 3 witnesses, Lena, your neighbor Mr. Davis, and your pharmacist Mr. Green. Mr. Green already gave a written statement saying he was misled. I reminded him. Exactly, he said, that will help us. But they've also added one more, Dr. Lehman, a psychiatrist who supposedly tried to evaluate you but claims you refused cooperation. I frowned. I've never met a Dr. Lehman. I know, it's fabricated. They're painting your refusal to see anyone they choose as proof of delusion. The manipulation was breathtaking. They were building an entire case out of my self-protection. We spent the next few days gathering evidence. Mr. Weber requested Dr. Moore's official report, which clearly confirmed my excellent cognitive health. He also contacted the pharmacy to retrieve camera footage of the day Lena had visited Mr. Green. Every piece mattered. Still, even with all the logic and preparation, a quiet dread followed me like a shadow. I would wake at 3 a.m. and sit in the dark, thinking about the boy I'd raised, the child who used to leave sticky fingerprints on these same walls, who once swore he'd take care of me when I grew old. How had that boy turned into this man, the one trying to erase me from my own life? Eleanor noticed the fatigue in my eyes when she visited one evening. You have to keep your strength, she said gently. Courtrooms are cold places. You'll need warmth inside you to survive it. All 6. I'm not afraid, I said, though the words trembled. I just can't believe it's come to this. She reached across the table and took my hand. They're fighting for money. You're fighting for your dignity. Never forget which side holds real power. The next morning, I decided to face the witnesses myself. Mr. Weber was hesitant, but I insisted. I need to look them in the eye, I said. I need to see who's willing to lie for greed. We started with Mr. Green. The moment he saw me walk into the pharmacy, he looked stricken. Mrs. Richter, he said, coming from behind the counter. Please believe me, I didn't know what I was signing. I do believe you, I said calmly. But I need you to put it in writing exactly what happened. Who came, what they said, and how they misled you. He nodded. I'll do it right now. While he typed, I looked around the store. Ordinary shelves lined with vitamins, bandages, cough syrup, objects of trust. And yet, even here, they had managed to twist the truth into a weapon. When we left, Weber looked satisfied. That's one domino down, he said. Now, Davis. My heart sank. The confrontation was inevitable. Mr. Davis was sitting on his porch when we walked up, arms folded, expression already defensive. Mr. Davis, Weber began politely, we understand you've given a statement suggesting my client behaves erratically. We'd like to clarify that information. I don't have to explain myself, Davis muttered. I said what I saw. And what exactly did you see? I asked. You yelling at your family in the street, having strangers over, putting up cameras like you're some kind of spy. The people you call strangers are contractors, lawyers, and friends, I said evenly. The cameras are for protection. And as for yelling, yes, I raised my voice. When my son and his wife broke into my home, he scoffed. You sound paranoid. Oh. I looked at him directly. Do paranoid people document every payment, every receipt, every call? Do they keep their homes clean, their finances balanced, their minds sharp? Or is it easier to believe that an old woman can't possibly be this organized without being insane? His gaze faltered for just a moment, but then he shrugged. Not my business. You're right, I said quietly. But it will be when you testify. I hope you can sleep afterward. When we walked away, Weber exhaled slowly. He's uncooperative but inconsistent. That'll work in our favor. That evening, as I sat in my living room, fatigue hit me in waves. The sun dipped low, the walls glowed gold, and for a brief second, I felt my husband's presence in the quiet. You've done enough for them, his voice seemed to say. Now do something for yourself. So I did. I opened the envelope from Dr. Moore and reread her report. Then I placed it carefully atop the growing pile of evidence. I poured myself a small glass of wine, a rare indulgence, and toasted to the invisible woman I had been, now resurrected through paper and ink. Later that night, I wrote in my journal again. They think the courtroom will destroy me. But the courtroom will see what they can't. A woman who survived everything they tried to take. 2 weeks passed quickly, filled with meetings, calls, and late-night preparations. On the eve of the trial, Eleanor came over with a warm pie. "For energy," she said, setting it on the counter. "I'll need it," I smiled. She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You know what tomorrow really is, don't you?" "A hearing," I replied. "No," she said softly. "It's your emancipation." When she left, I stood alone by the window, the house bathed in the soft light of the moon. My garden swayed gently in the wind, roses and thorns alike moving as one. I realized something then. Freedom wasn't loud. It didn't come with fireworks or applause. It came quietly, like breath returning after a long suffocation. Tomorrow, I would walk into that courtroom not as a victim, but as a witness to my own strength, to the truth they tried to bury, to the dignity they could never take. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, that sterile blend of bureaucracy and history. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a navy suit that had belonged to another version of me, the woman who once managed charity accounts at the library, before motherhood swallowed every ambition. The fabric still fit, though my posture had changed. I stood straighter now. Mr. Weber met me by the metal detector, his briefcase in hand, expression steady but kind. "You ready?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "I've been ready since the day they said I wasn't." "Oh." We walked into the courtroom together. It was smaller than I expected, intimate, almost. A single judge at the bench, 2 lawyers, a handful of spectators. But the air was thick with tension. On the left, Max and Lena sat side by side, their faces tight with a performance of concern. Max couldn't quite meet my eyes. Lena didn't bother trying. When the clerk called my name, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I wasn't here to fight for survival anymore. I was here to tell the truth, and I had all the proof I needed. Judge Miller entered, gray-haired and deliberate, the kind of man who weighed every word. "We're here today to consider the guardianship petition filed by the respondents, Max and Lena Fisher, concerning the financial competence of Mrs. Renate Richter," he said. His tone was measured, almost gentle. "Let's proceed." Their lawyer, Mr. Prossett. Fisher, the same man who had once stood in my kitchen rifling through my papers, began first. His voice carried the practiced rhythm of manipulation. "Your Honor, my clients come to this court out of love and concern," he said smoothly. "Over the past several months, Mrs. Richter has demonstrated increasingly erratic behavior, abrupt financial decisions, isolation from family, and paranoid delusions resulting in unnecessary security measures. They fear she's being exploited by outsiders and may endanger her own well-being." I could almost admire the craftsmanship of the lie. It was polished, rehearsed, and utterly hollow. When he finished, Weber stood. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Your Honor, what my client has demonstrated is not incompetence, but independence. The evidence will show that every so-called erratic act was, in fact, a rational response to exploitation by the very people sitting at that table." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Weber began with the documentation, the $33,000 in transfers, the canceled automatic payments, the statements from the bank and the receipts. He laid them out like bricks, one after another, until the truth formed a solid wall no accusation could climb. Then he called witnesses. Mr. Green, the pharmacist, took the stand first, visibly nervous. "I was misled," he confessed. "Lena told me it was for insurance paperwork. I never meant to say Mrs. Richter was unwell. She's perfectly capable." Lena shifted in her seat, her jaw tightening. Next came Ethan, the contractor who installed the locks and cameras. "She hired me because her family entered the house without permission," he testified. "She wasn't paranoid. She was being smart." Each statement added weight to my side of the scale, and I could feel it tilting back toward justice. Then came Dr. Moore. Her presence filled the room like quiet authority. She explained her evaluation, how I'd passed every cognitive test, how my reasoning and comprehension exceeded expectations. "Mrs. Richter shows no sign of dementia, confusion, or psychological impairment," she said firmly. "She is fully capable of managing her affairs." The courtroom went still. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker behind Max's expression. Shame, maybe, or recognition. But it vanished as quickly as it came. When it was my turn to speak, my hands didn't shake. I took the stand, swore the oath, and looked straight at the judge. "Your Honor," I began, "for years I believed love meant giving without question. I paid their rent, their bills, their emergencies. I told myself it was kindness. But kindness without boundaries isn't love, it's servitude." Lena's eyes flashed, but I continued. "When I stopped paying, they didn't ask why. They didn't ask if I was okay. They just asked how I could do this to them. And when I refused to sign over control of my life, they decided I must have lost my mind." I paused, letting the silence breathe. I've worked my entire life to stay independent. I managed finances, raised a child alone, cared for a dying husband, and never once missed a payment or deadline. If that's incompetence, then I suppose the word has lost all meaning. The judge's pen stopped moving. "I may be 71, I said, "but my mind is clear, my accounts are balanced, and my home is secure. What they call paranoia, I call survival." Weber nodded at me to finish. I took a deep breath. "I don't want revenge. I just want peace, the kind that comes when no one is waiting for your weakness to show." When I stepped down, the courtroom was silent except for the faint rustle of papers. Mr. Fisher, clearly rattled, called Max as his final witness. My son walked to the stand like a man walking to his own sentencing. His voice trembled as he tried to read from the statement Lena had written for him. She's not the same anymore," he stammered. "She changed. She doesn't trust us." Weber rose for cross-examination. "Mr. Fisher, when was the last time you visited your mother without asking for money?" Max froze. "I don't remember." "Do you recall how much she has transferred to you over the last 3 years?" He hesitated. "Maybe 10,000? Weber smiled thinly. 33,000 according to the records, and your wife's name appears on most of the withdrawal slips. Care to explain that?" Max's lips parted, but no words came. Lena shifted uncomfortably. "No further questions," Weber said, sitting down. Judge Miller closed the file before him. "I've heard enough." The next few minutes passed in a haze. His verdict came measured but firm. The court finds no evidence of cognitive impairment or financial incompetence. The petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, the court recognizes indications of attempted financial coercion by the petitioners. Consider yourselves warned. The gavel struck once, sharp as thunder. It was over. For a long moment I couldn't move. The sound of the gavel seemed to echo inside me, not like an ending, but like release. I exhaled, long and slow, the way one does after surviving a long illness. Lena stormed out first, heels clicking like gunfire. Max hesitated, turning toward me. His lips parted as if to speak, but whatever apology he meant to offer died in the silence between us. He left without a word. Weber gathered the papers and gave me a quiet nod. "You won," he said. I smiled faintly. "No," I said. "I just stopped losing." Outside, the autumn wind caught my hair and carried away the last of the courthouse air. I stood for a while on the steps, watching the leaves scatter like the fragments of a life I no longer needed to carry. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's mother or someone's burden. I felt whole entirely, fiercely, beautifully myself. That night, I didn't sleep. But it wasn't the sleeplessness of fear, it was the kind that comes when adrenaline hasn't yet faded, when freedom feels too new to rest inside your bones. The trial was over, the verdict final. I had won back my life. Yet, as I sat alone in my quiet house, staring at the framed photo of Max as a little boy, I realized that victories of this kind come with invisible wounds. I traced my fingers along the edge of the frame. The boy in the picture had big brown eyes and a smile full of promise. I could still remember how he used to curl up beside me on the couch, whispering that he'd take care of me when he grew up. Somewhere along the way, those words had turned to dust. In the days that followed, the phone rang constantly unknown numbers, messages left without names. I didn't answer. Mr. Weber advised me to keep a record of every call, every attempt to contact me. "Just in case they try something again," he said. But they didn't. After the trial, Max and Lena vanished like ghosts. At first I expected anger, maybe retaliation, but what came instead was silence, a thick, consuming quiet that felt both peaceful and tragic. I'd fought so hard to reclaim it, and now it pressed against the walls of my house like a stranger I didn't know how to talk to. Eleanor visited often. She brought tea, laughter, and the kind of companionship that fills space without demanding anything. One afternoon, as we sat in the garden surrounded by late-blooming roses, she said, "You know, Renat, it's strange how victory can feel so heavy." I smiled faintly. "Because winning doesn't bring back what you lost." "Exactly," she said, "but it gives you the chance to rebuild what you deserve." That word rebuild stayed with me. A week later, I called a real estate agent. "I want to sell the house," I told her. She hesitated. "After all those years?" "Yes," I said simply. "It's time to start somewhere new." The house had become a museum of ghosts, the echoes of laughter that no longer lived there, the spaces once filled with dinners, celebrations, expectations. I loved it once, but now it only reminded me of how much of myself I'd given away inside those walls. Within a month, the house was sold. I packed my belongings slowly, carefully, each object examined for its worth beyond memory. The pink dress I had once bought for Max's wedding still hung untouched in the closet. I folded it neatly, placed it in a donation box, and whispered, "You never got your moment, but maybe someone else will." Moving day came on a brisk morning. The movers loaded boxes while Eleanor stood beside me. "Where will you go?" she asked. "An apartment downtown," I said, "near the art center. I used to paint before all of this." Her eyes lit up. "Then it's time you paint again." The new apartment was bright and small, the kind of place that felt alive because it wasn't weighed down by the past. I unpacked only what I needed, a few photos, my journals, the vase Robert had given me on our 20th anniversary. Everything else I let go. That first evening, I stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Lights flickered in every direction, people laughing, living, moving forward. For so long, my life had revolved around someone else's needs, their comfort, their approval. Now, for the first time, every decision was mine. The freedom was intoxicating. I joined a local art class 2 blocks away. The instructor, a young woman named Mia, was half my age but treated me like an equal. She looked at one of my first sketches, a single rose emerging from a cracked vase, and said softly, "That's not sadness, that's rebirth." Her words made me smile. Each day began to take on a rhythm again. Morning walks by the river, afternoon painting sessions, evenings spent at small cafes where I read or talked with strangers who didn't know me as a mother, a widow, or a victim, just as Renate. It felt like coming home to myself. But freedom didn't erase the ache completely. Some nights, I would wake suddenly, thinking I'd heard Max's voice. I'd sit up, heart racing, only to find silence waiting. The love for him hadn't vanished. It had simply changed shape, no longer a bond of obligation, but a quiet grief for what could have been. One evening, while cleaning out old papers, I found a letter one I had written to Max years ago but never sent. It was full of motherly advice, reminders to eat well, to save money, to cherish love when he found it. I read it twice, then tore it in half. I didn't need to send it. The woman who wrote that letter no longer existed. Instead, I wrote something new. "Dear Max," I began, "I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I hope life teaches you what my money never could. That love isn't something you take, it's something you earn. Whether we meet again or not, I wish you the courage to face yourself." I didn't sign it. I didn't mail it. I folded it neatly and placed it inside my journal, a goodbye meant only for me. Weeks turned into months. My days filled with color again, quite literally. I painted the sunrise, the streets below my window, the faces of people who reminded me of humanity's small kindnesses. One day, Mia asked if she could include my work in a community exhibition. I almost laughed. "Me? At 72? Especially at 72, she said. "People need to see that it's never too late to start again." The night of the exhibit, I stood in front of my painting Freedom in Bloom. It showed a cracked window with sunlight pouring through, illuminating a single chair and a cup of coffee. It wasn't grand, but it was honest. People stopped, looked, and smiled. A man approached and said, "There's peace in this." like someone finally exhaled after holding their breath for years. I nodded. That's exactly what it is. Later that evening, Eleanor joined me at the gallery. So, she said, holding a glass of wine, what will you do next? I looked at the painting, my painting, and then out the window where the city lights flickered like new possibilities. Live, I said simply. Just live. She smiled, clinking her glass against mine. To freedom. To freedom. I echoed and took a long, deliberate sip. That night, when I returned to my apartment, I stood again on the balcony. The moon hung high, soft and full, like a promise. I thought of Robert, his quiet wisdom, his laughter. I thought of the young woman I'd once been, the mother I'd become, and the woman I was now reborn through loss, refined by truth. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to call, to visit, to need me. I wasn't anyone's savior, anyone's safety net. I was mine, and in that quiet, I whispered into the night, not to Max or Lena or even Robert, but to myself. You made it home. Looking back, I realized that my story wasn't just about money. It was about awakening the slow, painful, liberating process of remembering who you are after years of forgetting yourself for others. What happened between me, Max, and Lena wasn't unique. It's happening everywhere, to parents, to grandparents, to anyone who believes that love must always mean sacrifice. For years, I confused giving with caring, control with closeness, silence with peace. I thought that by keeping my son comfortable, I was keeping him close. But the truth is, I was keeping him dependent and myself invisible. Love built on money is a house built on sand. The moment the tide changes, everything sinks. Now, when I wake up each morning, I make my coffee, open the window, and let the air in clean, sharp, alive. I look at the city below, bustling with strangers who owe me nothing, and I smile. There is strange beauty in being no one's savior. There is dignity in living for yourself without apology. Sometimes, people ask me if I regret cutting Max off. My answer is always the same. No. Regret belongs to those who still believe they could have changed someone by giving more. I gave everything, my time, my patience, my savings, my peace, and it only made them hungrier. The lesson is simple but hard to live by. The people who love you truly will never demand that you destroy yourself to prove it. One Sunday, months after the trial, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, Max, Lena, and a baby I had never seen before. On the back, in Max's handwriting, it said, "Her name is Emily." I sat for a long while staring at the photo. The baby's face was round and soft, her eyes full of light. For a fleeting second, something inside me trembled, the old instinct to rush back, to fix everything, to become useful again. But then I remembered the courtroom, the lies, the humiliation. I folded the photo and placed it in a drawer, not out of anger but out of acceptance. Some stories don't end in reconciliation. Some end in clarity, and sometimes clarity is enough. In time, I learned to fill my days with things that fed my spirit instead of draining it. I volunteered at the community center, helping older women learn to manage their finances. I joined a reading group, traveled to Florence to see art I had only ever admired in books, and once, I even took a dance class badly, joyfully, freely. The more I gave myself permission to live, the less space there was for bitterness. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that aging doesn't mean fading, it means refining. The same way a diamond takes pressure to shine, a heart takes betrayal to see clearly. Losing what I thought I couldn't live without showed me that I had everything I needed all along: courage, wisdom, and self-respect. And to anyone listening to my story right now, maybe you're a mother who keeps paying the rent of a grown child who never calls, or a parent whose love has become a currency you can no longer afford. Please, listen carefully. You have the right to stop. You have the right to say no, to draw a line, to protect your peace. Love that requires you to disappear is not love, it's exploitation. Your worth isn't measured by how much you give, but by how much of yourself you keep intact. You don't owe anyone your destruction to earn affection. Set boundaries. Protect your savings. Protect your heart. Protect your time. The world may call you selfish, but that's because they benefit from your exhaustion. Don't let guilt disguise itself as love. Even now, I think of Max sometimes not with hatred but with distance. I hope life teaches him what mine already has, that independence is the purest form of gratitude, and that no inheritance is worth more than self-earned peace. As I sit here tonight, finishing this story, the city outside hums softly. My apartment is filled with the scent of fresh paint and lavender. On the wall opposite me hangs my favorite painting, Freedom in Bloom. The cracked vase, the sunlight, the chair. A reminder that even the broken things can become beautiful when you let the light in. I sip my tea and smile to myself. The woman I used to be would never have imagined this version of me, strong, calm, self-assured. But she fought for her peace in ways no one saw, and because of her I can finally live in peace. If you've stayed with me until now, maybe something in my story resonates with you. Maybe you've felt invisible in your own life, or trapped by expectations that only take and never give back. Let my journey remind you, it's never too late to choose yourself. You can forgive without returning. You can love without losing yourself. You can start again, even after 70. So, if this story touched you, I invite you to share it. Leave a comment, tell me your thoughts. Have you ever had to reclaim your life from people who misunderstood your kindness? I would love to hear your story too. And don't forget, subscribe to Voices of Auntie Me, where we share real-life stories of strength, healing, and second chances. Stories that remind us all that even in pain, there is wisdom. Even in endings, there can be beginnings. Because the truth is, you are never too old to learn that the most important person you must take care of is you. And as I turn off the lights tonight, the city quiets, and my heart feels light. For the first time in a long, long time, I am not waiting for anyone's approval. I am simply free.